Welcome everyone to Drawing as Creative Play with Amitai Plasse. I'm very excited to be with everyone here and really excited to share this workshop with you. In case you don't know me, my name is Cecily Saylor and I'm the creator of Typewriter Tarot. And my work and the work of this project, Typewriter Tarot, is basically to help more humans live creative and magical lives. And so I work with folks in all kinds of ways to help them do that. And tonight's class is one of those ways. There's a lot of folks in this community who are writers and plenty of folks who do not think of themselves as writers. And for both, or for all of us, I really think it's great to mess around and have fun in different mediums and to let our creativity get active in a lot of different ways. I think that it's like when you nourish one part of the garden, you nourish the whole garden. And so I happen to know Ami and know Ami's work. Ami and I, he gave me permission to share this. We actually met in group therapy and we were in group therapy together for 3 years. So we like know all each other's secrets. I'm just kidding, we don't. But we have been vulnerable with each other in a therapy space. So I just think that's a fun fact because it's really interesting where relationships can go. And I got to know a little bit about Ami and his art in that context. And then when we left group therapy, I really got to know Ami a little bit better because you actually can't I'm explaining too much. Anyway, and so Ami does incredible work as an artist and an illustrator and an animator. He is a working artist and has a business called Gonzo Viz. And a lot of Ami's work is going out in public and drawing things as they're happening. So there's a lot of like live music performances here in Austin. So Ami goes out to those and does a lot of drawing. He does them for corporate events and he sets up different kinds of art projects that collaborative groups like in the workplace can do together or that can happen at different kinds of events. He's made illustrations for promotional posters. His work has been on the cover of the Austin Chronicle. And he's got a really beautiful mission, which is to go out and help kind of like mine, but like in his own way, show more people that art is accessible. You can do it. It's fun. We should be doing it together. It can happen anywhere. And I just think that's really cool. So I wanted him to come in and offer us these exercises that we can try no matter whether we think we suck at drawing or think we're really good at it. This should be accessible to all of us. This should be a place that we can play. So Ami, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here. What else would you like to say about yourself?
Well, I'll get into that in a little bit, but for right now, I'd love to kind of jump into something. So I'd love for everyone to take their first piece of paper and draw like 2 rectangles on them, and they can be squarish. It doesn't really matter. Just 2 rectangles on a piece of paper. Unless you have a really tiny piece of paper, then just draw 1. But any normal size piece of paper, draw 2 rectangles. And what we're going to do is once you've kind of drawn those, we're going to look to your little still life that you've hopefully set up. And we're gonna look at it. We're gonna draw it for 4 minutes. And I think we talked a little bit about, Cecily mentioned before, no erasers. What we're gonna do is we're gonna draw with something which is indelible. And the whole idea is not to make it perfect or make it a perfect rendering. The whole idea is to draw what you see kind of fearlessly without thinking too much about it, and to try to really fill up the rectangle that you've created. So drawing, not just drawing an object in the middle, but whatever you see in the foreground, whatever hits the sides of the rectangle, really fill up that rectangle. Start with the biggest shapes first, the biggest things that you see, and then go to smaller details. If you make a quote unquote mistake, something you don't like, just keep going. Don't worry about it. This isn't about final results. This is about the act of seeing and creating. So without further ado and talking, everyone kind of ready to go? Everyone have their rectangles and their still life set up? All right, cool. So I'm going to hit the timer starting 4 minutes right now, and I'll give you guys like a 2-minute warning. I usually play music. I don't know if it works if I play music if I'm not the host over it.
I think that I can. I will work on that.
All right. I usually play a little music, but yeah. And as you're drawing, just really try to not think too much about what you see and try to render it as you think it should look like. Really just see the objects and put them down on paper as best you can. And again, really hit the sides of that of that page. So making sure that lines hit every edge of your rectangle while you're doing it. And I'm going to draw along with y'all. And this is an exercise that I don't know if anyone has done it before, called a 4-minute burn. It's something that I started doing when I was in college. It was like an assignment for my drawing teachers to do every day. And at first I begrudged it, like everything. But then I kind of got really into it, just doing these quick observational drawings. And really looking at them and making them feel like not something which is the goal is some sort of final beautiful piece of art, but an exercise, sort of enjoying the act of creating and just being inside the act of creating without thinking about final results. And a good way to just start to like look and notice the world around you and start to be able to kind of put it down on paper, kind of build some sort of drawing muscles, the connection between your eyes and your hand, and kind of circumventing your brain to a certain extent. Not thinking too much about it, just doing. We have about 2 minutes left, guys. So hopefully just really focus on getting that rectangle full and before you get down into any smaller details. And as you draw, I just want to kind of take a second to notice how you're feeling when you're drawing. I'm not going to get too much into that, but just like notice how you're feeling and like notice what you're thinking about and what you're thinking about, what you're looking at and seeing. We've got 45 seconds left, guys. About 20 seconds left. So get any of those last details in that you want to get in there. Fill in any of that last objects or whatever you have here. 10 seconds left. Okay. So pens down. So how did anyone done that exercise before? How did y'all feel about it? Oh, cool. Yeah, everyone want to kind of hold up their drawings. I love to do like the whole hold up the drawings little exercise. Wow. So when I do this, I love seeing just the different ways that people see things and approach it, and it's really amazing. And it's always like an inspiration to see how other people are kind of perceiving the same space and world as I am. So it's really interesting. Anyone have any thoughts on how people like this exercise? You feel good, bad?
I hated it.
You hated it? Tell me why.
I mean, I like to erase.
Uh-huh. How come?
Like I've been drawing a lot lately, but I have been illustrating. I've been copying, right? Like I look at a thing and I can draw it, but it takes me a really long time. And so this is really challenging my perfectionism.
All right. Yes, that's the total intent of it, by the way. Anyone else like
I
or dislike this
oh,
exercise?
I liked it. I right at the beginning when you asked us to bring a pen or something, I decided to bring my pastels because I can't erase them. They're big, and
Uh-huh.
um, and then they're fun, so they're colorful. So I was hoping to be creative and fun, and there's no room for detail, so I wasn't going to get stuck. So I kind of, and so when you, I was like, what are we doing with the box? And then when you said, oh, you have to fill it in to the inside frame, I was like, oh, I'm looking at my still life. And I was like, okay, at least I had time to get some background stuff in there. So at first I thought it was going to be a challenge, and it was. But then when I started like, oh, just letting go, it like I filled in my frame. So.
And that's a great point. Like drawing with something really bold and thick allows you to let go because you can't get in there on those little details. You
Right.
can't like go back and, making like the sort of the bold strokes and trusting yourself. It reminds me sort of how design and art was before digital, the advent of digital art, there people made a little bit harder decisions. They built instincts that way, and that's how when you start to see the world and you start to make decisions that are based not on like, thinking too much about it, but like it starts to come out of you. And by what's great about this exercise being 4 minutes, you can kind of do it in a day, and you could do it every day, and you start to build a day. It's like I kind of equate it like if you play tennis or you play guitar, or you play golf, whatever, it's just like building those muscles, and a lot of it's just for fun, just to like kind of start building those skills and building that coordination, whatever it is. And it's kind of the same thing, thinking of this almost as like, going out and shooting hoops or strumming the guitar for 5 minutes, or whatever, hitting the ball against the wall. It's not about winning or creating something or finishing something. It's just about building those skills and building those like kind of inherent muscles in your between your brain and your hands. So anyone else have any thoughts about it? Anyone else like it? Or go ahead.
I think I surprised myself because I have a tendency to overthink. And when I relaxed, my hand just did something, and I was like, oh, look at that. It looks better than what I was trying to do. So yeah.
So Brandy, outside of just like thinking about like the perfection of it,
Yeah.
did you like the act of just doing it? Did that feel good or
Yeah,
not?
I mean, it felt uncomfortable,
Uh-huh.
but that's okay, and
Uh-huh.
I also came up against something else that I'm working on, which is I have a hard time being in situations where I perceive that I'm being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go outside the box.
That's okay. Doesn't bother me.
Okay, cool. So I mean, like I had that feeling too, where I was like, I'm not going to draw inside this box just because somebody told me to draw inside this box, even if I'm going to draw poorly. So, anyways.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that like this is a page I drew like the same kind of style, and I started with boxes and it all flows out. I never stay. I mean, there's no rules here except that the only rule that I have, and the only thing you can do wrong here is by doing nothing. Once you're doing, and that's the important thing. And that's with anything, but with art especially, like this is especially great exercise because it's designed, and everything I'm going to kind of go through today, and I don't want to talk too much, I want to get back into more exercise, but is really designed to be able to create without creating a lot of barriers for yourself. I think a lot of people want to have an artistic practice and whatever it is, but what I've realized is if you create all these, like it has to be this, I have to have all this equipment, I have to have this time, for most people it's not going to happen. If you allow yourself to like to just say, I can do something for 5-10 minutes a day, I can do it in my wherever I am, then that's the likelihood that you'll do it is much greater. And I want to make sure that when we're creating, there aren't a lot of barriers, so you can like draw with anything, draw anywhere, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to move on, but what I would like to say just before I go is that like I want to make this really interactive, so I love that you guys are talking. Anyone who wants to kind of jump in, ask questions as we go, feel free. I want to make this really interactive. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ivona, and I was thinking like if I was doing it myself, I guess setting the timer for 4 minutes, a part of me is kind of like, Okay, you gave us a little bit of a clue of how much time we have left. So like, I guess, how do you work with that too? When you don't have a feel for exactly how much time you have left, and kind of there's a goal of like, having it filled in by the end.
Yeah, that's a good way. Just don't look at your stopwatch until it goes off is a great way to kind of approach it,
And kind of like accept if
Yeah,
wherever you ended, you ended.
exactly. And sometimes I'll go back to my drawings later and I'll like, oh, I really like this one, and I'll paint it or something or whatever, just because you can. There's no like, no one's gonna say, hey, you can't do whatever you want with your drawing. But I think in the essence of this exercise, it's great to have that time. Awesome. All right, Cecily, can we go back to the presentation real quick? So let's keep going. Yeah, we just did that, so we'll skip that. So anyone can draw. I'm sure plenty of people say that, but I guess I'm holding that mantra for myself. But yeah, anyone can draw, and like as I said before, as long as you're doing it, you're drawing. So when people say they can't draw, I'm like, you definitely can, because almost anybody can. So who am I? Just real quick. You want to go to the next slide? Oh, skip this one. Oh, there's another one of my mantras. There's no wrong. There again, if we're doing, I'll skip my mantras because I have too many of them. Keep going. We can go to the next one. Yeah. Okay. My name is Ami. I'll go back one. Ami. Oh, there we go. My full name is Amitai. I'm from New York. I moved to Austin in 2011. I used to work in advertising and marketing as a creative director and art director. But I always was drawing. I went to school for illustration, and I always kind of did that illustration and animation work on the side as well. When I lived in New York, I used to go every day from Brooklyn to Manhattan on the train, and I just used to draw people. Especially this was before like phones worked on the whatever. So I would just be like, I'm stuck here for 30 minutes. And I just started to look around and see all the amazing people that were on the New York City subway. You can see almost anybody there. And I took that time to just observe. And what I learned about the drawing there, and as we talk about time, is, in the subway, anyone can get up at any time, move, get off the train, someone can stand in front of you. So there's a certain urgency to drawing there. And what I really would do is like, think about when I zoned in on somebody or a situation I was going to draw, I was like, what's really important about what I'm seeing, and trying to capture that really quickly and then start to fill out after that. So it kind of set my brain into a different way of kind of working. When I moved to Austin and I discovered there was no subway in Austin, and I was like, what am I going to do now? I was drawn back to the music scene here, just how anyone who lives in Austin knows how accessible it is. You can go out any night of the week and walk into a club and just draw and be like 5 feet away from your subject. So it had a similar energy, but also had a sense of community, which was nice to be able to access, and using creativity and drawing as something to kind of engage with people has been a big part of my work as well, especially since I moved to Austin. Using the drawing as an interface to meet people and get to know them. And it's always, you'll be amazed if you start drawing out in the world, like how people will start to engage with you just a little bit differently than normal. I also worked in tech for a while, so I draw conferences and talks and creative talks, and eventually people started like hiring me to do that on the side. And eventually I was like, oh, I can leave my corporate life and do this for a living. So that's what I've been doing for the last, I guess, full time for the last 6 years. So anyway, that's a little about me. We'll go to the next slide. I have a company called Gonzo Viz. If anyone's familiar with the term gonzo journalism, a big inspiration for me was a guy named Ralph Steadman, an illustrator who worked with Hunter S. Thompson a lot. And the whole idea was going out and being part in the midst of what you were kind of documenting with your drawing and illustration, not just being sort of casual or distant observer, like drawing, engaging with the subject matter, really feeling the energy and the vibe of what's going on. I mean, I think Cecily mentioned I draw a lot of music. I'll be sitting, I've had drawn from a pit where kids were landing on top of me, and like, while I was trying to draw, and just like taking everything that's happening and going with it and letting that be part of the creation experience, so go to the next one. And quickly, it's just my contact. If anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, it's AmiRock73. Gonzoviz.com is my website. Ami@gonzoviz.com is my email. If anyone wants to reach out afterwards with any questions, or I love when people who've been in the classes share some work they might have done afterwards. So please follow me, and I'll follow you back, or feel free to email me questions or artwork or whatever. I love to keep in touch. So we did the still life. We'll skip through that. Okay, so now that we've kind of got ourselves a little comfortable, warmed up a little bit drawing, we're going to kind of break down our drawing into a kind of a specific modes, like different ways of approaching it, and different ways of seeing things. So the first thing we're going to do is contour drawing. If you want the next slide. You guys are probably familiar with contour drawings out in the world. They're kind of what they sound like, just basically seeing the objects that are out there and really just rendering by just using line to create the shape. So we're not really thinking about tone and color, lights and darks or anything. We're really thinking about the shapes and forms of what we see. As you can see by this Matisse drawing, by this drawing by Catherine Carey, you'll see these are kind of different approaches to it a little bit. But the one on the left being a little bit more precise, the one on the right, it almost looks like one line going across everything connected. And these are all different ways to approach it. But again, they're really paying attention to sort of the physical forms that you're seeing, the shapes, the depth of it. And that's what we're going to be rendering just with line. Go to the next slide. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this contour drawing. It's going to be 2 minutes long. I encourage you to draw almost without picking up your pen. It's a great way to start to let your hands almost be a guide, almost your eyes as you go through it, as opposed to relying on kind of picking up and being very precise about it. It'll just kind of help you start to almost thinking about it like a printer plotter that kind of goes across the page. Think about your hand as that kind of mapping out your drawing. So we're going to draw the same still life that we drew before, but we're just going to use the line to kind of help us create the shapes that we're going to see. So you want to go to the next slide? Actually, we can go away. Let's go away from the. I don't want to spoil it. We can close out the presentation for a sec. So we have 2 minutes, and I'm going to set the timer, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning. Any questions before we start? All right. Ready, set, start. And again, as we do this, it's kind of the same thing applies. Try to hit all edges of your composition, see what's right in the foreground, see what's in front, see what's in back. If there are things in the background, get them in there as well. But again, just using that line to kind of capture it. And the one good thing about and again, don't worry too much about proportions and stuff. It's kind of nice to just be able to kind of use your line to kind of, again, kind of build the composition. So, having as much continuous line as possible is always really helpful. And like little extraneous lines, obviously don't really worry about. This is just an exercise, so. What's great if you start drawing with some of the bigger shapes, when you start to go into some smaller details, you can start to use the shapes to help you kind of find the reference points for the smaller details. So if like there's a big rectangle and the smaller rectangle, smaller shape, kind of hits at this point, that point, you can kind of use it as a reference. All right, time's up. I forgot to give you guys a warning, but hey, maybe that's a good thing. So we can kind of just go. So how did you all like this exercise? Better or worse than the first one? Less? How come?
I didn't have enough time to fill in my picture.
Didn't have enough time?
Yeah. It was different. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of had the same scene, but you know, there's quite a bit of difference about what I got.
Do y'all want to hold up your drawings?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take screenshots, so if you don't want to be in the photo, just hold it over your face. Oh, come on, Brandy. Come on, Amy. Everyone's doing it. Here,
Yeah.
mine's really not great either. Okay. Thank you.
And again, it's like, it's really great to see everyone's, because you can kind of notice how the different approaches of everyone's approaching things different ways. What I like about this is, again, it's sometimes it's amazing. It's fun to create in a very small box and seeing what you can do. So again, having the constraint of just being able to use line or just being able to use X, Y, and Z, it kind of allows you to kind of flex a certain amount of creativity. Sometimes when there's too much choice of like too many things, there's sort of like a deer in the headlights. So like, what do I do? When you have a very small, like again, when you're traveling around and you only have a very little one color to draw with, you can figure out how much you can actually do with that one color. You have just line to do, you can figure out how much you can do just with lines. So you can always create amazing shapes and compositions with just lines. So now that we've done that, we're going to do something. If you didn't like that, you probably really hate this, but I like it. It's called, so if you, by the way, if you needed to do new rectangles, we're going to do a bunch more drawings. So if you want to go to the next page, we've already just done 2, we're going to do a blind contour drawing, and which is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to do the same thing, except we're going to not look at our drawing at all. And I know this is a little scary for people, but remember, this is just part of the greater like exercise that we're doing. And, you know, don't worry about the results, just think about and enjoy and be cognizant of how you're feeling when we're doing it itself. So again, what we're going to do is do the blind contour drawing. We're going to look at our same composition, but do not look down at paper. Now, what's here, it's actually pretty important. We're not going to do 2 minutes. We'll probably do 90 seconds, because after 90 seconds, it's hard to figure out where you are anymore. But it's really important with this to keep your pen on the paper, because your pen is really your eyes now, like really mapping and understanding where you're at. I think, Brandy, to your point, you'll probably go outside the box on this one, and it's totally okay. Don't really worry about it. Just think about what you're doing. Just see what you're seeing and let your hand kind of move in reaction to what you're seeing, and don't worry too much about anything else. Any questions before we start? Okay. Well, I'll give us 90 seconds starting now. And just trust your instincts too. Like, I think a lot of times what happens is that we actually have it within us, but we double overthink things or worry too much. Just trust your hand and let it go where it goes. If you feel like you're finished, you can be finished, or you can even make a second one if you want. Sometimes these go pretty fast. About 20 seconds left. Ten seconds. All right. All right. So how did everyone feel about that? You liked it? Yeah, I want to hold it up. Wow. Ross, you're doing pretty well with kind of holding the consistency.
I really struggled not to look. I glanced down a few times, so
Oh,
I
okay.
cheated. I didn't mean to, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, does anyone want to say what they kind of noticed about either about what they felt when they were doing it or actually when they saw everyone else's drawings?
I I was impressed to see everyone's drawings because I mean, who knows what we're looking at? I think that, because self-judgment is like prevalent, but then when you see like how all the things that you had to go through just to, to be present with those 90 seconds and do something and look and not look and just like and trusting, and then everyone else shows up with great stuff that they had to go through the same thing. So I enjoy this group effort around.
Yeah, I mean, if we move outside of just the quote unquote making it look like it was an actual rendering, is there anything else you guys notice about the drawings? As compared to maybe the other, yes, Indy.
They're getting worse.
No,
No? Okay.
I don't think so.
Sorry.
I mean,
Or they're
if-
getting less realistic.
well, but as far as like the sort of energy of them, like, is there a difference between the regular contour and the blind contour ones for anybody?
I noticed like more trust around doing my creation, so there was a little more space to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I generally notice too, like in a lot of these, yeah, Ross, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just surprised. I just realized I actually fit everything in the box this time, and the other times I went outside of the box. So that's surprising.
I noticed when you were describing it, I was like, let's go, let's go, let's go. Basically like wanting to see what happens. And so that it has that element of surprise if you really don't
Yeah.
like. And yeah, that's something I was noticing. Whereas the evaluating is kind of happening all along. If we're looking down. I mean, granted, I wasn't like thrilled with what came, but still I like the surprise.
Yeah, it has a lot it's a wonder part of creation is just like seeing what can happen, and like, and also because you expect it to be, so everyone expects these drawings to be terrible, so there's just kind of a freedom with them, I think, and you feel it because the energy is always like when you go from what I've noticed when I'm looking is going from the contour to the blind contour, even though they're obviously a little less precise, the energy is so much heightened, just like because people have really let go. And it reminds me of like, some one of my favorite painters, like a de Kooning or something like that, or, who is pretty abstract, but like you can see the energy and the strokes and like the way it was probably started as an observation from life. It's kind of what I noticed. It's always kind of interesting. Anyone else have any thoughts about the blind contour drawing?
I've done it before where people are asked to draw somebody on a Zoom screen or self on a Zoom screen with blind contour. That could be a fun idea. That's all I wanted to share.
Oh yeah, well, I've done it in like 6,000 meetings. That's all I really do. Like if I'm in a meeting for more than 10 minutes, I'm zoned out and drawing everyone. That's all I'm doing. So, yeah, and it's also good on the subway if you don't want someone to know you're looking at them or drawing them. You can kind of just like sit there, so you can be like de facto. Anyway, awesome. Well, yeah, it's a fun thing to do, and I think I don't know, it's kind of fun to kind of let go. Let's move on to the next one, and then we're gonna totally like shift gears here and shift brain gears right now. Actually, we're gonna talk about this real quick, but we won't do it. So, you guys all familiar with hatching? The concept of hatching? Okay. Well, for those who don't know, it's a really, if you just have go ahead.
Oh, I think it was just someone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hatching is basically a really quick way to kind of create tone in your drawings, even if you're just working with line. And there's a few different kinds of hatching. Can you go to the next slide, please? There's something called a cross hatch, which you probably have seen a lot in drawings, especially in a lot of pen and ink drawings. It's a really quick and easy way to kind of create a variety of tone. It's kind of just what it sounds like. It's perpendicular lines, and the more dense they become, the darker your tones become, and you can use it to kind of create volume. So again, it's a really quick way. Some people are very meticulous in their cross hatching, very like, right angles and all that stuff, and very clean lines, but it's a good way to do quick rendering, quick drawing as well. So it can be a little scratchy, but it's fun. It helps you kind of create those tones. There's a parallel hatch, which is kind of using just parallel lines. A contour hatch, which is fun if you want to start to really give volume, having the lines kind of following the volume and sort of the surface of whatever you're drawing. And then there's stippling. Again, this is for people who have a lot of time in their hands and a lot of patience, but basically just using little dots to kind of create the different tones you want. And you can be very precise with stippling, and you can build things up. The good thing about hatching is you can start very light and build up, your tones as you go. So it's not like when you're drawing with paint or whatever, painting or something where you just kind of put something down. This, you can kind of build something over time. Next slide. And it's the Mary Cassatt drawing, she's a lot of little different kinds of hatching in here. Next. And these old Goya prints, which are some of my favorite, and this was done is an etching. So it's basically, scraped into a plate, and you can see all the different kinds of line work and hatching they use to kind of create these different shapes and create the volume. But you really just with one tone, the depth and the sort of breadth of tone you can create with just one color. And there's a little aqua tint in here too, but is really amazing. Next one. You guys might be familiar with these Wall Street Journal illustrations where they do a lot. It's all done on stippling. You can see the little dots breaking up and making everything. And there's some cross hatching in there too. And it can interpret in all sorts of ways, like comic books. Jack Kirby, the kind of master of the modern comic book, just the way he used line to create these different tones and shapes in his own kind of unique way. And a Van Gogh drawing, we can kind of skip through that. You can, and so I was usually would do an exercise, and this is something you can kind of do with or play with on your own. We won't do it now, but basically just kind of drawing 5 boxes across and practice kind of creating sort of a 0 to 100% black sort of gradient almost, with it. If you're like sitting on a phone call or a boring Zoom call and you want to just like kind of mindlessly do something, this is kind of a fun thing to do, just to kind of build that muscle of being able to create a tone just with one color of line. Now we can skip this one. And it's also kind of fun when you start to play with other materials, thinking about how you can use tone. When you have a pencil, when you have graphite, using especially like a dark art pencil, being able to kind of build up tones, with ink, how these all behave. With marker, you can start light and start to get darker, and some markers are water soluble, adding a little bit of water, charcoal. So I would encourage you guys after this, if you wanted to kind of extend things, buy some of these materials, play with them, just like play with them on a piece of paper and just make marks and play and make tones and stuff like that. Not, again, taking the pressure off, trying to throwing that right into a drawing, just kind of play with it on a piece of paper and see where it takes you. Now we can skip this one. Okay, so shape drawing. Go to the next slide. So when I was a kid, I got really into drawing Marvel comics. Before I ever really took any proper art classes, someone bought me this book called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And what was great about it, I learned some lessons for it. But one lesson I learned was basically, when you're trying to draw something complicated, especially like a figure, a body, human body or some complicated objects, they're really intimidating. And you're like, oh, I can't even think about how to do this. But what this taught me was you could break down like complex, characters and figures and machinery, whatever, into simple shapes, because everything is broken down into simple shapes. And once you get those shapes down, it's a lot easier to draw some boxes and squares and stuff. And once you have them down, then to start to build over that. But you basically kind of use the shapes to kind of create almost a structure of your drawing. And then you can start to add the detail. But it's a lot easier to kind of to draw, represent, something like that very in a simple shape than to try to do it in the complexity that it exists in the world. So go to the next slide. What I want to do with you guys is approach our still lifes and our drawings using simple shapes. So basically what I want to do is to kind of look at your composition and really think about what's the lowest common denominator shape that would kind of create the object that I'm looking at. And again, start with your big forms and then start to create your basic shapes. And once you kind of create your basic shapes, you can kind of move in smaller and start to add in detail with smaller shapes. But you're going to be really like tempted to like start to draw organically or start to draw contours. Really try to keep it just basically at using circles and triangles and rectangles to kind of create everything that you're seeing. And sometimes you might be looking at something and be like, it doesn't look like any shape, but think maybe sometimes what could fit within that shape and using that as a guide. So for instance, it's a bottle, it's a rectangle that fits everything. And then you can start to break down smaller shapes from that. So we're going to do the next drawing of still lives using just shapes. I'm going to give you all 4 minutes to do it. Any questions before we start? Yes.
Okay, are we looking at what we're drawing and are we looking at our subject and looking at what we're drawing?
Yeah.
Cool.
You can look at your paper too.
Okay, got it.
All right, so we're gonna get started. I'll give you guys 4 minutes and I'll definitely give you a 2-minute warning. Starting now. And just like anything else though, especially when you're doing this, there isn't like a right or wrong answer for each of the ways you create it. Like sometimes you'll look at something, it could be a rectangle, it could be a triangle. It's really up to your own interpretation, but really try to keep to those basic shapes. And again, start with the big things. And as I mentioned before, when you start to have the big shapes, you can really kind of arrange them and figure out the proportions a lot easier when you're using these simple shapes, because you could say this rectangle will intersect this circle at this place, as opposed to things that are more organic. And it's also a great way to see it for things like perspective and foreshortening, which will throw you off in the real world. Like, oh, if my arm is moving towards you, you'll have to draw it a lot shorter, but it'll seem weird. But if you break it down to a shape and just think about the size of that shape, it's a lot easier to kind of get those proportions correct or closer to what you want. About 2 minutes left, guys. And sometimes your shapes might like go past the edge of the page of your box, which is totally fine to extend those out. Not all the shapes have to live right inside, neatly inside the box. About 10 seconds left. All right. All right, pens down. Everyone want to hold up their drawings?
Keep them up for just a sec, y'all. Make sure y'all get to see everybody's too. Very cool.
So what do you guys think about this exercise? It's a really big brain shift from the last one.
This was much more comfortable than the last one.
It was more comfortable for you? How come?
Not being able to look at the paper made me very, like, I got an icky feeling inside. And I could almost like, I had to check the page a couple times just to like make sure. And when I didn't, things got like really spacey, and it really brought up the like, I'm super, like, I don't like doing things I think I'm bad at. And that exercise I felt very bad at. And I was like, ugh. But the shapes are really like supportive to me. They like gave it little building blocks, and I could look at the paper. So that was way better.
Anyone else? How do anyone else feel about doing the shapes?
It
It was better. It was better, I thought. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
we also had some practice doing it. So, I mean, maybe that had something to do with it. But I have a hard time flattening space. So perspective gives me a problem. So I just had it. It's really pretty easy. So
Yeah.
anyway.
But yeah, I mean, I think the goal is when you look at it as find those shapes, like you can almost, and the goal of a lot of these exercises as you start to do them is that you don't have to figure out those complicated things like perspective and stuff anymore. Because if you're just kind of following the things that you see, they'll start to create the perspective for you. Like if you're seeing like the shape and drawing what you see, you know, you're not like, oh, this has to be on this point line, you know, and if everyone's ever done like a graph with perspective lines, it's just, it'll start to naturally kind of create that space for you, a natural space. It doesn't necessarily have to be super realistic, but it'll start to create that natural space for you without you having to do like the heavy lifting of figuring things out. The whole idea is just by observing it and putting down what you observe, it'll start to create it for, hopefully it'll start to create it for you, you know. Yes.
I felt more challenged and annoyed with this one, actually.
Uh-huh.
Partly because what I was drawing was natural life forms, which are leaves, and so then kind of being forced to reduce them to this, I think I was just annoyed. And also, it didn't necessarily help me with like proportions or spacing.
Mm-hmm.
So at least like looking at the result, I'm just like, okay, this is looking almost like less and less like the thing, like almost like, or I feel like it represents it less than the blind contour drawing even does. So
it's interesting whenever I do this exercise, there's always a big split of like there's shape people and there's contour people. And there's I don't know what it means outside of the context of this, but it's always interesting to see how some people love like the order of creating shapes, because it's very much like building with blocks almost, you know, and some people love just like the sort of organic nature of the contour, you know, so it's interesting. But what is interesting too, and what I've done sometimes is, and if anyone's ever done like any modeling or especially computer modeling, is the shapes are very much like how they build the computer models, and then you start to use those as the basic shape, and then you start to organically sculpt or draw on top of it. So using it as almost like a structure, you know, inside. What do they call it when you build the wire? Like a wire framework inside, and then you can start to build on top. So it's an interesting way to start. You can start to use some of these things interchangeably as well. So we're going to do this another shape exercise, but you know, if we go back to the, actually we don't, yeah, let's go back to the presentation real quick. Go to the next one. I don't know if anyone's ever sat and when they were a kid and just sat and doodled like, well, I don't know, I did it a lot. Just doodled like 3D shapes all over the places, like the little box and the cube. And this is a way to sort of use the shape concept, but start to add volume to it. So for some people who, you know, sometimes you think you're flattening it too much with just the flat shapes, this allows you to kind of draw it almost like an artist model, you know, to start to build some volume in. And this is a good place to start to use your hatching if you start to play with it, to start to add a little bit of volume. So this time we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to actually use, we're going to kind of use these 3D shapes. So we're going to use cones and spheres and boxes and cylinders as opposed to using just flat shapes. So we'll do another 4-minute drawing with the same basic composition, but approaching it again with using more 3D shapes in a 3D space. Any questions? All right, cool. All right, ready, set, go. At the same time, just like as we did before, you start with your biggest shapes and then start to work in smaller shapes. And you can start to hopefully use, like measure the shapes against each other in so much that it will help with sort of proportion and where everything kind of sits in the space, and really allow yourself to start to build and construct your, and again, as if you were playing with blocks, like when you were a kid, or maybe as an adult, I don't know. But Remember, you can always build shapes upon your other shapes when you keep going. So especially if you feel like you've started with a basic thing, you want to refine it, keep adding. 20 seconds left. Okay. 4 minutes up. So Ivana, how did you feel about it this way? Did you like this any better than the flat ones, or
I hated it way more.
really?
Actually. Yeah, well, because I'm looking at leaves, so it's hard to even think of them as like full 3D objects. They're kind of thin, so it's just like I couldn't really get very far. Like I didn't know how to make 3D objects altogether out of them.
Can you hold it up? Could I see? Okay, it looks pretty. It's an interesting interpretation,
Well, I mean, I started basically adding, shading where there's a different color. And that's that.
Does everyone else want to kind of hold up their drawings real quick? Interesting. Ross, I see that you switched subject matter.
You're on mute, Ross.
Sorry, it's the same. I didn't get around to doing the leaves.
Okay.
Leaves.
So what did everyone else think about this versus the other one? Is this harder, or Brandy, what do you think?
I think being timed is really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just personally for me, like feeling rushed, doing something. And again, it's like it's more personal. Sorry, I've never really like talked like this in a group setting.
No worries, you're doing great.
On Zoom about something other than business. I just recently started drawing, and when I do it, I like to go really, really, really slow. And I take a lot of time with it, and it's because it's one of the few things in my life where I can go really slow. So yeah, this is making me really emotional because when I go really slow, I make things that look sort of beautiful. And it's been building my confidence a lot. And my confidence feels very shook right now. But but that's okay. That's cool. Like I need to get shook, I guess. So that's what I'm gonna say about that.
Well, feel free to get shook here. I think everyone is cool with being shook or whatever,
I also want to thank you for sharing that, Brandy, and just here you get to notice like why and how slowness feels really good and what it allows you to do and when you need it. And also, when you want to push yourself or mix things up a little bit, then it looks like speed or timers would create that. So you get to play with that. Thank you.
On the flip side of that, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was gonna say.
On the flip side of that, whenever I'm feeling some creative resistance, it's actually really hard for me to like imagine sitting down and like really focusing on my art. So for me, it helps so much to just be like, okay, it's just 5 minutes. I can like do at least like this amount and just like make something. So yeah, that's the flip side of thing of just like forcing yourself to like do something for a few minutes.
That's a good point. I think I've felt times really overwhelmed by it all. And so if I'm like, okay, this is this one part that's going to happen in X amount of time, then it's easier to kind of just keep moving to the next thing.
I had a weird thing happen when I first started. I got really confused because I started out with this and realized I had to go in the wrong direction. And then, but that's why I have a problem with perspective. Sometimes I draw what I think it is rather than what I'm seeing. You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's hard. I think it's a lot of it is like trying to parse. I mean, that would be kind of a good way. The good way to kind of to work with that is to say, hey, I'm going to draw like the biggest shape I have in the background, and then start to see, put that other shape on top of it and say, where does this point hit that point? You know, where does this point hit that point? You know, and it starts to become basically taking the thing that you see and seeing how it all works relative to each other. And that, because otherwise, yeah, because when you start to think about it, your brain constantly tricks you. You know, if I sat down and said, hey, someone draw a teapot, you know, you'd be like, oh, what does a teapot look like? You know, and it's hard to just, your brain starts to interpret what that is, even if it's a simple object. So the goal with some of these things to do over and over again is you start to just say, I don't see a teapot, I just see this sphere or this circle, and then behind it is my refrigerator, and I don't see a refrigerator, I see like this box, and where does the circle hit the box, you know? And then so you don't, and that way you're not looking at it and trying to figure out how to render a teapot, you're just seeing these shapes and how they all sit together, and it starts to build on its own, because oh, there's a little square, a little rectangle on top, that's where the spout is, and I can see where that rectangle is. So hopefully with doing some of these exercises, they start to free you from having to think about it too much, and just again like kind of break things down. Because yeah, I totally, if I look at a rooftop, I love drawing rooftops like in New York, but there's so much geometry that goes on, and you're like, what am I doing? When I just started to say, okay, this point hits this point here, and then I connect, it's almost playing like a connect the dots type of thing. You know, everything kind of connects, and looking at his shapes, or almost looking at it as like a constellation in space, you know. It just helps when you break it down. That's why this is a great thing to break things down to like simpler things sometimes. But yeah, it totally crazy how their mind can fool you.
right, yeah.
So it's like 7:40 Central Time. I don't know if anyone wants to take like 5, and we'll just everyone kind of take a little, do it, then use the restroom or go grab a glass of water or whatever, and we'll reconvene in like 5 minutes. All right. You want to go back to the presentation, please? All right. I'll keep going. Oh, so I have some tips in here, and actually this reminds me, as we were talking about a little bit about the especially when you're drawing with shapes and other things, using it as sort of a structure to help build your composition you're drawing, and then start to draw over it. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do this, I kind of do like using like a marker, or even you can use this with like watercolor or something else. Markers are great though for quick sketching, because you can get things down pretty quickly, and I used to steal them from my office all the time, so they were in great abundance. But even dry markers are kind of fun for this. But actually, Cecily, can you go back to the camera real quick, please?
Which one?
Oh, just turn off the presentation for a second.
Oh yeah, my bad. Hold on.
But so I'll kind of start sometimes drawing with just marker with like a lighter color, help kind of work things out, you know, as we talked about, especially when you're drawing with shapes and things like that and plotting things out. And once you kind of have things as you want, then you can start to use a darker color or finer pen and start to add, you know, detail. It's just a nice kind of easy way to sketch, so you can start to, you know, work things out a little bit more, you know, so you can kind of be methodical. Sometimes for people who want to be more methodical about the way they build their drawing, you work all those things out with like a lighter color, then go in with like a finer pen with a darker color, and then you can start to add more details. So again, it's kind of a way where you could start to even take like the shape drawing and combine it with the contour drawing, and kind of use a bunch of tools at once to kind of start to build your drawings and stuff as well. Awesome. Go back to the presentation. yeah, happy accidents, they're shit. And that's another one of my little mantras. And, you know, one of the things, I mean, I draw a lot with an iPad now for work, but one of the reasons I really encourage people to play with materials and use materials is because all sorts of things happen that you're unexpected, especially when you're working with, you know, with different materials like watercolor or markers and using water. And, you know, you get all these like amazing things that happen by accident. There is sometimes a lot less control, especially when you first start using a medium. And that's just a great way to start to learn and see what those things can do, especially when you have such little less control of them. So just just a thing to keep in mind as you go through, like the idea that mistakes are made and things that happen that seem like spills or you know, they were just didn't came out of nowhere. Those are great things and things to be the kind of really like, there's a lot of great learning and interesting things that can happen for them. Next slide. So the next exercise, and Jane, this will be a little bit kind of back to what I was talking about, this exercise about how when you start to use some of these techniques to see the world and to put it down on paper, how it'll start to actually build a composition for you. So like the sort of planning and sort of conscious thought of how everything needs to be will be kind of happen automatically. So this is light and dark drawing. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So the whole idea here is looking at your composition and instead of looking at it as lines or forms, really just find and the lights and the darks in them and start to put those down. Like by finding the darkest darks in your composition and putting those shapes down, like if you see a dark shape, say it's a shadow underneath your tea kettle, or, you know, the sort of negative space behind your table, whatever it is. So the idea is to find the darkest darks you can in your composition and find it as a shape and put those things down and start to build your drawing that way. And, you know, this again is something that's left up to interpretation. I kind of try to look at it as a 50% threshold, something that seems more than 50% dark or 50% light. Things that are more than 50% dark, I generally put down. But the easiest way to kind of start this is to find the things that look really dark in your composition, look at them as shapes. You see it, they all kind of create a clear dark shape. Draw that dark shape down, fill it in as a shape, and start to build your drawing that way. And again, it's sort of it's not an exact science, but you'll start to see how it starts to create things just by finding those dark shapes. So what we're going to do is, this takes a little bit longer. We're going to do like a 6-minute drawing. Any questions? And again, this is a good thing to use, like if you all are working with a pretty dark medium, it's a good one to use. Like if anyone has a Sharpie, even if you want to outline your shapes with like a pen or something, and then fill them in with Sharpie, you can do that as well. But you want to use something which is going to like put down a lot of dark tone really quickly. And I would try not to do too much of, you know, we've done that hatching, but I think in this exercise, the whole idea is to make a decision whether something's going to be a dark or a light. It's kind of a binary choice, as opposed to having kind of some grays and stuff like that in there.
That was going to be my question. So we're not shading or, you know, having gradations. It's like all or nothing. Like I have an apple, it's either going to be light or dark, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we start? Okay. All right. I'll give you guys 6 minutes, and I'll give you guys a 3-minute warning as we go. Kind of fun about this, and especially if you're working on like a dark subject, like if you had a wine bottle or something like that in your composition, or bottle of olive oil, is even in something which appears to be really dark, there's definitely your darks and lights. So finding that relative space is kind of an interesting way. And again, you can interpret it in a number of ways. There's always a lot of really interesting shapes that exist in the darks of like bottles and things like that. And don't worry too much about the proportions and things here. You know, the idea is not to have a perfectly proportioned. It's really just to kind of start to build the depth and volume of your composition using these darks. And we've reached about 3 minutes. And also resist the urge to maybe outline everything. If you find like a dark shape on the edge of thing, then use it. But really let the shapes that you draw in build your shapes, as opposed to worrying too much about outlining things, which might be like a natural sort of inclination. About a minute left, guys. All right. Everyone want to hold up their drawing? Wow. Folks really got it. So what did y'all think about this exercise?
That
Jane,
was
what did you think?
hard. That was hard.
Was it hard?
Yeah, yeah. It was hard to get, sort of get oriented on the objects, because when I start doing the dark one, then the lighter one is way off, and it was a mess. It was a mess. But okay.
Did you find it harder than the other ones, or was this kind of like the
Yeah, I did. I thought it was, sure. But
what was the challenge in it, you think?
it was just getting my bearings, sort of, because I have like a cell phone underneath the package that's underneath the book. And so the black of the cell phone is a much darker one, that thing underneath there. So once I got that done, then my package was over to the side, and this was too far this way, and it's on a black table. So I spent a lot of time doing the black table. But anyway, it was just, I just kind of got lost in the space doing
I
that.
got you.
But it doesn't look too bad, I guess,
No,
considering.
not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I mentioned is kind of like, especially with the black table or something like that, it's almost like everything is relative. So you look in the black and like what's really black and what's like light, and playing with that is always kind of an interesting thing, especially like when there's reflective materials. But I mean, you seem to have, it's coming together for me,
You can tell what it is a little bit anyway.
Yes. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Well, I cheated a little bit. And that when we took our 5-minute break, I tried to do the shape study again, and I did, and then it was better.
Awesome.
I mean, better in the way that it looked better, and I felt less rushed, and so that felt really good. So when we did this one, admittedly, we had longer, but it felt better because I was less rushed. And then I also took one of my items off the table for me to draw within the 6 minutes. So I understand that I'm like modifying it for my comfort. But I found that when I did that today, I did enjoy it more, and I was able to focus more on one object. And I was able to focus on the dark and light on that object. And when I look at it now, I'm really glad I did it.
That's awesome.
Does all of that make sense?
Yeah.
Why do you feel glad you did it?
What?
What do you feel glad about, or like, why do you feel glad you did it? And you don't have to answer this either.
No, I mean, it's good for me, but it's punishing for you guys. I don't know. Because I wanted to quit.
Okay.
And walk away, and I didn't. And that's it.
You're glad you didn't quit.
I'm glad I didn't quit.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else have any thoughts about it? Yvonne,
Yeah, I kind of love this one. I've
really?
done this, and I don't know, it was freeing, and like it had a simplicity, but it was a simplicity that I was enjoying way more than trying to transform it into shapes. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Amazing. Great.
I felt that way too. and I don't know if that's because me and Ivona are Capricorns or something, but I'm going to Iceland next week, and this process is making me want to take my little like nature journal, which I usually write about like the birds I see. Sometimes I draw plants, but I think this could be a cool way to like look at a landscape and do like that would feel very intimidating to me. But if it's just the dark and light or something, that could be a really cool way to capture that or play with that. So I just wanted to second that there was something exciting in the simplicity or freeing or something for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice, it is when you have a simple task, and again, like for me, like I love like the simplicity sometimes of using just one vehicle or one whatever to kind of create, and it just like you can do so much with it, you know. Awesome. So let's see, we have about 25 minutes left. Do you want to, Cecily, do you want to do the breakout rooms? Or do you want to do the card? Which one would you rather do?
Should we ask our participants?
Okay. Yeah, so
do y'all want to vote
kind of
or do you want us to decide?
Well, I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
How do you feel about some of these little programs and apps and things that you can put on your phone and stuff that will kind of allow you to see something and draw it on a screen? It's almost like cheating, but is it useful, or should we just be more bold and do this kind of thing? I mean, if we want to really.
Well, what I would say is, I mean, I think if we want to really like challenge yourself, and again, this is something you do for yourself. It really shouldn't be for anybody else, you know, just for your, you know, I think the one thing about screens is they just flatten the world for you, you know, so you're taking a 3D space and it reinterprets it into 2D dimensions. So, I mean, there's plenty of times I've drawn from screens and sketched from that, and there's something to be learned from it for sure. But I think it definitely should be a supplement maybe to working from life, you know, because again, you're kind of lost that dimension of interpreting the space. It's because it's done it for you to a certain extent. But I think there's, you know, there's definitely something to be learned by doing things like that. I worked as an animator. I've worked on animation for a long time, and a certain amount of the animation is called rotoscope animation. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it's basically you use live action video as a source for your, you know, the animation. So basically you're kind of animating over it. People say you're tracing it, but it's not really quite like that. But what I did gain from doing that, using this source, and again, it's flattened video I'm working from, is I learned a lot about how things move and the relationships of things. So there's something definitely to be learned from working over a screen for certain things, especially I think in doing exercises like this, you know, if you want to find darks and lights and things like that and seeing those things, I think it's something worth it. But I would always recommend working from real life as much as possible as well. And partially also in changing your environment too. Like, you know, we're all kind of inside now, but like, I would encourage you guys, if you're going to continue doing some of these exercises, is like, go outside and do them, you know, work in like a wide perspective, see how, you know, drawing in the morning versus the afternoon versus like dusk, or even trying to draw outside at night is really interesting. If we did this exercise with lights and darks at night outside, like finding those subtleties versus working the day, like all those kind of stimuli and changing inputs from like the real world, I think really enhances the experience and helps you kind of explore it a little bit more. But I'm definitely not someone who says don't mess with the screen stuff either. You know, I think you can kind of mix it up, and if it's convenient, again, goes back to my philosophy, is like, do what works for you. You know, if it's working for you and you can be creative and you can explore this with something on your phone, then do it. You know, if it makes it easier to do that, it's much better than like putting a lot of pressure or having to make things perfect in other ways. So I'd say a mixture of it is great. I think it's great if you guys are into it, is to get like a sketchbook or something you know, that you can keep. Like you can just keep it like a little one, you can put in a bag, or even I used to carry this in my pocket, you know, or something a little bit bigger you can carry in your bag. Just keep it in your handy, because having a place to start to keep these and deposit them, and also to start to see them over time. Like sometimes you're like, oh, I hate this drawing, or I don't like it. I do it all the time. But then when you kind of look back, I'll sit down and look back at things. I'm like, oh, I remember this. And then you also see how you evolved, you know, in the way you see things and remember things. And so I think whatever works basically, and having a vehicle where you could keep these things one central place is an amazing thing too. So I encourage getting like a sketchbook, and it could be part sketchbook, part journal, or, you know, I know a lot of you guys are writers, and keeping those things together it is something that would be, it's a great way to kind of have this as something that carries you through your life.
Yeah. I love that piece behind you too. Is that you? Is that your piece?
Yeah, it was a mural that I did for an event. And
Oh, I
after
love
the
it.
event was over, they were just going to toss it. So I had to cut it down. It was 10 feet high. So I had to cut it down to fit in my living room, in my dining room. So yeah.
I love it. Gorgeous.
So Cecily, we were talking about what we wanted to do next.
I think we should do the breakout rooms so
Okay.
folks can interact. But I think, yeah, you just need to explain and set up.
So if you were going to do title, what would you have done?
Okay, well, maybe we should give them a choice. So either there's a portrait drawing where you pair up and draw each other with a few little exercises, or pulling a tarot card, or looking at some that we can show you here and choosing one and kind of reinterpreting the energy of the card with some of the still life objects around you somehow.
So let's say who raise hands, who likes the idea of doing portraits of each other? Okay. Who likes the idea of doing tarot? We could also send if two people want to do portraits, we could have them do those, and then, you know, we don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, that's true. Ross and Pam Rose both liked portraits.
Actually, what we can do is, while everyone else is doing their thing, Ross and Pam Rose, you guys can do the portraits if you want.
Yeah, I'm fine with either one. What do you prefer, Pam?
You mean doing a portrait of everyone, did you say?
Well, I think the idea would be that you would choose one person.
Oh,
I would encourage you to do like 2 or 3 like 1 minute or 2 minute sketches of them, and then once you've kind of worked out some things with those quick sketches, do one like 5 to 10 minute drawing, you know. But you know, Ross, if you want to do that while everyone else is doing the thing, you have your choice of subject matter, you know, and you could do it. And I can give you a time if you want.
I mean, I would be the only one doing it?
Well, that's fine. That's what I do in every single meeting I ever sit in, is just do portraits.
Okay.
Well, I mean, since we're getting close, it's almost 15 after, so we have about 18 minutes. Why don't we do like a 10-minute activity? And if you want to draw a portrait, then you can choose someone in the room and just kind of focus on them and do some quick sketches, and then do something a little longer. And then if you want to do a tarot card, if you have a deck, then you can pull a card. And what we're thinking here is kind of looking at the energy of the card, like the vibe it gives you, the like yeah, whether it's giving you kind of like frustrated. You could also pick a card of your choosing if there's one that you want to work with, or one that already gives you a vibe that you kind of like have absorbed or thought about. And then reconstructing that tarot card with none of the imagery that you actually see in the card, but maybe trying to recreate that energy, that vibe, through some of the like smashing some of the objects you have, not like literally smashing them, but bringing them together. You might construct your own little new still life that kind of goes with it. And obviously this can be like very loosely interpreted, very free form, like all the rest of it. So do y'all feel like you have options? What other information do you need before we would start?
And Ross, if you want to do a portrait, you could also pin somebody so you can see them large.
What were you saying?
Okay.
Did you have a question, Jane, or a comment?
I was just saying, you just pull any card and see if it speaks to you, and then just interpret it visually on the page.
And I would encourage you guys to maybe use an object or something in the space that you're in to base this as your interpretation. So maybe not working straight from your imagination, but say, how does something in my environment speak to me in relation to this card, and kind of creating the composition, or using something in your environment to help you guide you along, as opposed to we've been doing a lot of observational stuff. So using some observation to kind of create that drawing.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so we're gonna do 10 minutes on me.
Yes.
Okay.
And Ross, maybe I'll give you 2 1-minutes, just quick sketches, and then you'll have like 8-minute studio drawing.
Hilarious.
Well, that's good.
When you guys are working both the portraits and the tower card, I mean, thinking about all these exercises that we've done, like, do you use one of them? Do you use all of them together? You know, these are kind of options for these are kind of options, you know, something to build on.
Brandy, I got the same card, basically different.
Discount cigarette and the land crash landing. I am so proud of you.
Oh yeah, Ross, next one. Sorry. I was like, why is my alarm going off? Ross, you want to jump to your next one? No?
Yeah, this is going way too fast for me.
Oh, no worries. You can take your time, really. The idea was basically just to do a couple like idea quick ones, like, and then to kind of get the idea to kind of work out a little bit of composition and stuff like that. And then kind of delve into whatever, but take your time, you know.
Okay, thanks.
Especially if you've already honed in on what you're looking for.
The hard thing against starting. I tried to open them, couldn't find them. Thought the feet to stop you. Don't stop you. Thought the feet to stop you. The hard thing, don't stop you. I know once. That's on my way and show that and the flowers will be bright. I'm very still have the night. If I ever catch a shuttle back on me, that's a piano, that's a star. I'm sleeping.
So we have 2 minutes left.
If I ever catch a shuttle back on the piano, that's a star.
Hey guys, I know it hasn't been a lot of time, and we can still work on these afterwards. But anyone want to share what they've done so far? Ha, it's me. I love it. If you send it to me, that'll be my Facebook profile picture now.
Okay, I did. I got the King of Pentacles. And the only thing around my desk, I didn't have any money or anything, but I had this ring, this silver ring. And then it's on a dark surface. So I started doing the ring, and then I realized it had a shadow. So I got a little bit of the shadow in there too.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah, so that's what I got. So
That's great. What did you use sort of like, what did you use, what was your approach to drawing as far as everything we've done tonight? How did you kind of think about it?
I tried to look at it as just a bunch of circles and ovals and things. And then it was interesting once I started doing that, then I saw, oh, well, that's not the only shape. It's also casting another shape. So before I know it, I'm doing all these ovals and lines that I didn't see right at first. So it was good practice in seeing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you want to do like a everyone hold up their drawing type deal?
Okay, I'll hold up first. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
One. Ross, will you put yours up real quick?
Come on. Yes.
Thank you. Oh, I like that, Stacy.
These are great.
Oh, so your leaves are like fully coming through. Cool, Stacy.
That's supposed to be a turtle at the bottom, but it didn't really come out as a turtle. There's also a figure in the background that I then had to cover because yeah, it was just a mess.
It looked lovely.
Hey, Rose, can you put yours up so I can take a screenshot so I can make that my thing? Hold on, I'm gonna pin you real quick.
I love it.
Thank you.
Hold on, let me get one too, Pam. So good, thank you.
So any thoughts on this and how how we as kind of I asked Jane, like everyone was kind of doing all these little exercises the whole time, and now we have this like kind of more open exploration. Any thoughts on like how that all kind of worked together for anyone?
This was very stressful.
Yeah.
This was stressful?
Yes, I think I liked having the parameters, around it that you gave us, because this was just like, oh my God, now I have to like, put it all together, and it has to be beautiful. And, I was wishing I had an eraser. Was wishing I hadn't chosen the portrait, even though I usually like to draw people. I got really perfectionistic and in my head about it.
And do you think it was just because the lack of any the structure around it?
I guess so, yeah. And I felt like it had to be perfect.
Maybe it was like because it was the last thing we're doing, and like it's like the culmination or something.
I guess so.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I just encourage you guys to like, I know it's easier said than done. Think of this as like, most people aren't artists or whoever. It's the drawings are not like one on their own. They're basically a continuum. They're all a journey from here to there to everywhere. That's awesome.
I really liked that we did building blocks. So when it became time, actually having the ability to do two things. So I pulled a card, and she had this like smear across her, and her name was Beauty. And in my vignette, which hasn't always been there, I have this like flower box. And so so for me, I was like, okay, I'm taking my shape, I'm putting flowers done in shapes on there, and I got to smear with the eyes of the beauty here. And I felt like it was easy because my vignette, for some reason, I mean, who would have known what I was coming to class for? So, all these different shapes and stuff like that. And so I really felt like all the different pieces we did tonight was able to, allow me to, pull something together from it. And so the beauty of just having the tarot and what was in my vignette here, and I just chose one thing. So, and then yeah, so, and then my shapes were there. So then you were the one that kept popping on the screen. So I was like, oh, you're the perfect shape for for my flow. So
I'm glad I could.
I
I'm glad
really
I could be
enjoyed.
of help today.
So thank you. I really enjoyed the process of getting, going from this beginning to this like moment. So thank you.
Great.
I know. Okay, sorry. I felt freer by the time we finished, and
Okay, that's
less
great.
self-critical. And I pulled this card, the Three of Coins, and I don't really know that much about tarot yet, so I had to look it up. So I looked it up really fast, and then I read about it. And get this. This is what this card is about, you guys. It's about learning and learning from others. And I was like, holy smokes, get out of your own head, me. And so when I did that, it helped a lot. And then I also didn't totally follow the rules because I just can't. That's another thing about me that I just have a raw hard time with it. And so I thought to myself, you picked two things that were really hard to draw. You should have just picked one, or you should have probably picked things that were a little more simple to draw. So I focused on the one thing I wanted to try to draw pretty well, and I did. And then I just did really quick sketches of all of you guys, because we were all here together trying to learn this tonight. And it was weird and hard, but I'm glad I did it. And I pulled this card, and it's just bananas. And that's what I have to say about that. Okay.
Can we see your piece again?
Ugh, all right. Cheese and rice,
I'm gonna take
Cecily.
a picture of it too. Oh, look at all those Zoom squares. I love it. That's great.
And that's a candle holder.
Okay.
This is a brass candle holder in the form of it's obviously a palm tree. Do you want to see it? Do you want to see what it looks like? Are we supposed to do that? Or are we not supposed to do that, Ami?
Sure. There's no, as long as you're doing something, you're doing what you need to be doing. So
Okay,
keep
dude.
going.
So it's this. Like, that's what I was drawing. If you can see it. So anyways.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay.
Anyone else want to share before we go? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cecily.
Since we're at time, I'm good to hang out for a few more minutes, but since we're at time, is there anything for anyone who needs to leave soon? First, I want to say thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to Ami.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ami, so much.
Ami, is there anything you want to say while everyone is here in case anyone needs?
Well, I just want to be brief because I don't want to keep anyone, but I will say that thank you all for sharing and also doing and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate them. I think Cecily will follow up with my contact information. So if anyone wants to reach out, has questions, or wants to just follow me or send me stuff, feel free. I'd love to, stay connected. And I would just hope that, if you enjoyed what we're doing, if you can make it part of your creative practice, it doesn't have to put a lot of pressure on yourself. 5 minutes a day or something like that, it's just a great way to kind of stay connected with seeing and putting it down on paper and being comfortable creating and putting stuff on paper. And I think even if you don't see yourself as the art as being essential to it, it's a great way, especially as writers and people to convey and express your ideas, using as a visual and building those visual skills to express your ideas, I think is a really powerful thing for almost anyone. So I encourage you guys all to stay with it, and please stay in touch with me, and any follow-up questions, I'm around, so give me a shout.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Can you put your contact information in the chat or something?
Yeah, I'll drop it in.
I'm gonna go because I'm gonna go